So imagine a world where everyone agrees. Same language, same goals, same ideas. No arguments in meetings, no comment sections, no "actually was guy." That was the world after the flood. Humanity had restarted, multiplied, and somehow ended up thinking, you know what we need? One giant project together. So people gathered in one place, no borders, no nations, just a massive crowd with matching plans and very high confidence. They looked around and said, let's build a city. Normal enough. Then someone added, and a tower. Still fine. Then, a really tall one. Okay. And finally, so tall it reaches the heavens. Everyone nodded. No objections. No risk assessment. No one asked what happens after the tower is finished. When nobody asks questions, that's usually a warning sign, but not here. They had new technology too. Bricks instead of stone. Bitumen for mortar. Innovation was booming. Spirits were high. This wasn't chaos. This was organization. This was efficiency. It looked less like ancient history and more like a modern startup with unlimited funding and zero dissent. One language meant perfect coordination. One culture meant instant agreement. One vision meant no friction. From the outside, Babel looked impressive. People weren't fighting. They weren't scattered. They weren't lost. They were united, focused, and productive, which is why the story usually gets summarized very quickly. Most retellings say they were proud, or they wanted to reach God, or they got arrogant and were punished. That explanation is neat, convenient, and mostly misses what's actually happening, because if pride were the problem, humanity would be in trouble constantly. And if height were the issue, mountains would have been shut down long ago. The text slips in something subtle, almost casual, easy to skip if you're not paying attention. They say, let us make a name for ourselves. And then, almost as an afterthought, so that we may not be scattered. That second line is doing a lot of work. This wasn't about reaching heaven, it was about staying put. The tower wasn't a ladder, it was an anchor. Babel wasn't built out of ambition alone. It was built out of fear. Fear of dispersing, fear of uncertainty, fear of losing control of the group. They didn't want to explore. They didn't want to spread. They didn't want anyone leaving. This wasn't chaos forming. It was stability hardening. And from a distance, that kind of unity looks perfect, until you realize no one's allowed to walk away. The problem wasn't the height of the tower, it was the intention behind it. That detail matters, because nothing in the story says the tower was too tall, unsafe, or structurally unsound. The issue shows up in what the builders say, not in what they build. They explain their own motivation pretty clearly. Let us make a name for ourselves, so that we may not be scattered. Those two lines are easy to read and even easier to underestimate. Making a name sounds harmless. People do that all the time. Careers, brands, legacies. No big scandal there. But then comes the second part. So that we may not be scattered. That's the key. This wasn't about reaching heaven. It wasn't about challenging God. It was about avoiding movement. They didn't want to spread out. They didn't want uncertainty. They didn't want different directions, different cultures, or different outcomes. They wanted permanence. Think of it like a company saying, we're growing fast, and no one is ever allowed to leave. Same office, same mission, same path, forever. At first glance, that sounds efficient. Everyone is united, everyone is aligned, no friction, no risk of fragmentation, but unity can quietly turn into dependency. Everyone needs the system, everyone relies on the city. Everyone's future is tied to staying exactly where they are. Collaboration slowly becomes control, and nobody officially announces the change. It just happens. The tower, in that sense, wasn't a spiritual object. It was an insurance policy, a symbol saying, we're safe here, we're staying together, nothing changes. Security was the goal, centralization was the method, and centralization feels comforting, right up until it isn't optional anymore. The city starts to matter more than trust. The structure replaces flexibility. Belonging starts to depend on compliance. No one is chained, no one is threatened, no one is technically forced to stay. They just never build a way out. The more successful the project becomes, the harder it is to imagine life anywhere else. Leaving stops feeling like an option and starts feeling like a mistake. That's what makes Babel interesting. It wasn't a reckless experiment. It was a well-designed system, too well-designed. A city that works perfectly when everyone agrees, but quietly collapses the moment someone wants something different. From the outside, it looks like unity. From the inside, it feels like safety. But safety without movement doesn't stay safe for long. And that's where the story begins to get uncomfortable. Babel wasn't chaos. It was too much organization. Everyone spoke the same language. That meant no misunderstandings, no delays, no awkward clarifications. Instructions traveled fast. Decisions happened instantly. Planning meetings were short and suspiciously pleasant. People didn't just communicate the same way, they thought the same way. They evaluated risks the same way. They agreed on priorities without debate. Disagreement was rare, not because it was banned, but because it felt unnecessary. When everyone around you thinks exactly like you, dissent starts to feel strange, almost rude. From the outside, this looks like perfection. Imagine a company where everyone agrees. No pushback, no resignations, no one asking, "What if this isn't working for me?" Sounds efficient. It also sounds like a place where no one can leave. That's the problem Babel quietly walks into. Unity becomes so complete that alternatives disappear. There's no backup plan because no one imagines needing one. There's no second option because the first one works too well. At first, growth looks impressive. Then it starts to repeat. Same ideas, same solutions. Same future copied over and over. Nothing breaks, nothing explodes, nothing obviously fails. The system doesn't collapse, it stalls. This is where the danger actually lives. When unity removes the option to leave, it stops being unity. It becomes a cage. No walls are added, no guards appear. The trap isn't physical, it's structural. Everyone's life depends on the same system working forever, which means questioning it feels risky, leaving it feels irresponsible, and imagining something different feels almost impossible. Efficiency goes up, freedom quietly goes down. There's no diversity of direction, no creative tension, no friction that forces adaptation. Growth turns into maintenance, progress turns into repetition. And that's why Babel isn't dangerous because it's weak. It's dangerous because it's strong. A system that fragile would collapse quickly. Babel doesn't. It holds together beautifully. Too beautifully. It becomes one city, one culture, one future, with no room for variation. The moment someone wants something else, the system has no way to respond. That's when unity stops being a strength and starts becoming a liability. Nothing dramatic has happened yet. No thunder, no voices from the sky, just a perfectly functioning project heading in one direction, with no exits. And then, the interruption comes. The confusion wasn't blind punishment. It was a strategic interruption. Nothing gets smashed. No tower collapses, no fire, no flood, no dramatic demolition sequence. The structure is still there, the people are still there. What breaks is communication. One moment instructions are clear, the next they aren't. Words don't land the same way. Sentences fall apart mid-thought. Perfect coordination suddenly feels impossible. Languages start to mix. A builder gives directions and gets a blank stare. A supervisor repeats the order. Still nothing. Someone nods confidently and does the exact wrong thing. Meetings become painful. People talk. No one agrees on what was said. Plans get rewritten, then rewritten again, then abandoned. The project slows, then stalls. It's like cutting the internet to a system that was doing way too much with perfect connectivity. Everything that depended on total alignment stops working. The tower doesn't fail because it's weak. It fails because it needs everyone thinking the same way to survive. With communication fractured, the illusion breaks. People can't coordinate endlessly anymore. They can't maintain one single direction, and without that pressure pulling everyone into the same future, something unexpected happens. Movement. Small groups drift off. Families relocate. Communities form elsewhere. What looked like chaos from the center turns out to be motion everywhere else. This is the irony of Babel. The thing that looks like destruction actually creates options. Instead of one massive system, many smaller ones appear. Instead of one future, multiple paths open up. Cultures develop, languages evolve. Different ways of living start to exist at the same time. Babel doesn't erase humanity, it multiplies it. And that's important because the goal was never total destruction. If it were, the story would end very differently. The city remains. The tower stands unfinished. History simply moves on without it. What's removed is the ability to lock everyone into the same direction. The confusion forces people to adapt, to improvise, to trust smaller communities instead of one massive structure, to move instead of staying frozen in perfect order. From inside Babel, it feels like failure. Plans collapse, coordination disappears, the great project is abandoned. From the outside, it's the opposite. Humanity spreads, differences emerge, creativity shows up where repetition used to be. What looked like punishment turns out to be a release valve. The system that had no exit suddenly has many, and the moment people leave, the tower stops being necessary. What seemed like the end of something impressive quietly becomes the beginning of something much bigger, which is why what looked like failure changes everything. Babel didn't fail because of too much ambition. It failed because of fear of spreading out. By this point, the pattern is clear. One people, one language, one project, one shared goal. Don't move. Everything was designed to keep everyone together forever. The city, the tower, the system, it all pointed inward. Stability over exploration, control over change. From the outside, it looked strong. From the inside, it felt safe. But safety has a cost. Structures that promise total security usually ask for freedom in return. And forced unity always charges growth as a hidden fee. Babel wasn't built to reach heaven. It was built to avoid uncertainty. That's why the interruption mattered so much. Once people couldn't coordinate perfectly, the spell broke. The system couldn't hold everyone in place anymore. And the moment movement became possible, something healthier replaced the tower. Diversity, different languages, different cultures, different paths forward. The confusion didn't destroy humanity. It stopped humanity from freezing in place. And that's the part most summaries skip. Babel didn't collapse because it aimed too high. It stalled because it was afraid to move. That line reframes the entire story. This isn't about pride being punished. It's about stagnation being interrupted, about a system that worked too well and needed to be disrupted before it locked everyone into the same future forever. Seen that way, Babel feels surprisingly modern. It's like staying in a job that never lets you grow, not because it's awful, but because it's comfortable. The pay is fine. The routine is familiar. The risk of leaving feels bigger than the risk of staying, until one day you realize nothing is actually changing. Babel didn't fall apart in flames. It didn't get erased from history. It just stopped. And stopping was the point. The tower became unnecessary once people could leave. The city lost its grip once unity stopped being mandatory. What looked like failure was actually a release. Humanity didn't lose something at Babel. It gained options. More directions, more voices, more futures. So the shocking reason Babel failed isn't that it challenged God, it's that it tried to outgrow movement itself, and movement won. Babel didn't collapse. It paused because it had to. Before we move on, one last question. Which story should be explained next? Noah, Abraham, or Sodom?